From the moment I confirmed my husband was cheating on me, I started to formulate a plan to systematically empty our shared accounts and assets. I understood that if we proceeded with a typical divorce, splitting everything we owned equally, the woman he was having an affair with would ultimately be the primary beneficiary. With that realization, I made the decision to drive our company into financial ruin. My logic was simple. If there was no money left, there would be nothing for a judge to divide. The outcome would be that all of us would be financially destitute, and I would simply have to start my life over from nothing. The prospect didn't frighten me because I was the one who had built our business from the ground up in the first place. My husband, Daniel, had only profited from my efforts and then had the gall to complain that I had become weathered and exhausted. The other woman, Sarah, was a relative of mine. I had extended a great deal of help to her over the years, and she repaid that kindness by betraying me in the most profound way possible, an act that felt like a direct and personal insult. That was why I settled on a strategy of mutual destruction, a scorched earth approach where I was fully prepared to burn down the entire empire I had constructed. While my husband lay in a coma following a serious car accident, I moved quickly to dismantle the company piece by piece. When Sarah finally understood what was happening, she broke down completely. She ran to find me, her face streaked with tears, and asked if it was truly worth it to go to such lengths just to get revenge on someone like her. I simply nodded, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction. I told her she should feel proud that she was the face that had brought down an empire. When Daniel eventually woke up, he spent 3 days in a dazed and confused state. The first coherent question he asked me was what the point of it all had been. I laughed at his question. I explained that while I may have lost a significant amount of money, I had won a victory for my own principles. In response, he flew into a rage, smashing everything within his reach and screaming that I was an insane woman. But his anger was powerless. It was too late. I had already put my own exit strategy into place. I never had any intention of going down with them. I had just arrived home after a long-haul flight that had kept me in the air for over 10 hours. I was on the verge of collapsing into bed when the smug and gloating text messages from Sarah began to appear on my phone, one after another. There were pictures and messages, the complete collection of her triumphs. One photo showed Daniel supposedly taking a break from his incredibly demanding schedule, sitting at a small children's desk, patiently watching her son complete his homework. Another showed Daniel looking exhausted after a full day of work, coming home and immediately lifting her young daughter onto his shoulders for a playful piggyback ride around their house. There was also a picture of the house he had decorated according to her specific tastes, now featuring some new and expensive piece of decor she had recently acquired. And, of course, she included a detailed list of the latest gifts she had received from him. Usually, she sent a complete inventory of her wardrobe and shoe collection, but I suppose she decided to omit that this time. Compared to the overwhelming shock I had experienced the first time I discovered the affair, I now felt a profound sense of boredom. Daniel walked up behind me without making a sound and glanced over my shoulder at my phone screen. He frowned when he saw the messages from Sarah. I didn't expect him to reprimand her for being so thoughtless and cruel. Sarah was so bold because she knew she would never face any consequences for her actions. As I predicted, Daniel simply took the phone from my hand and gently placed it back on the table, his face showing almost no sign of guilt. Then he attempted to comfort me. "No matter what happens, she will never be more important to me than you are, Eleanor," he said softly. "We always agreed that we would focus on building our careers first, and then we would start a family. We had a plan for you to have a baby when you turned 35, but why don't we adjust that timeline and move it forward a few years? We never imagined the business would become so successful this quickly. Life doesn't always unfold according to our plans. I will be a good father, and I will love our child more than anything." He tried to reassure me further, saying, "Don't you worry. Whatever her children have, our child will have much more. So much more." I watched his mouth form the words, and the entire situation struck me as incredibly absurd and almost comical. He didn't want a divorce, but he clearly wanted to maintain a second family on the side. It was obvious that his primary fear was that I would take half of his assets in a settlement. People often say that a divorce is financially ruinous, and now he was desperately trying to tie me to him by proposing we have a child together. He was truly living in a world of his own fantasy. I had been carefully planning my escape for a very long time. I furrowed my brow, pretending to seriously consider his proposal. He actually seemed to believe I was contemplating it. He knelt before me, trying to coax me into agreement. I know that all those other women are only interested in my money. You are the only one who has ever genuinely cared about me. How could I not cherish you? I let out a laugh that bordered on hysterical and stared directly into his eyes. Daniel, you're asking for an incredible amount. You've likely never experienced betrayal, which is why you can speak about these things with such ease. Let's put aside the other women for a moment. After all these years, you've conditioned me to believe that it's normal for successful men to have occasional flings. I've heard that excuse countless times. Let's focus on Sarah. She's my distant cousin. She doesn't have a degree or any marketable skills, and she's incapable of handling difficult work. She couldn't even manage to keep a simple job as a cashier. Her mother came to me and practically begged me on her knees to give Sarah a position at the company. And now, what is her mother's attitude? Suddenly, she's talking about distant relatives and questioning who we even are. She says those ungrateful things without a hint of shame. I have lived in this penthouse for many years, but the moment Sarah became pregnant, she was moved into a mansion. My aunt then had the audacity to bring my own mother there for a tour, an experience that literally made my mother ill with anger. Think about how my mother has treated you, her son-in-law, all these years. Tell me, does she deserve to be treated this way? I used to wonder why, out of all the women in the world you could have chosen, you had to pick someone so cheap, someone who thinks nothing of betraying the person who helped her. I used to think you were lowering your own standards. But then, I finally understood. You are both the same type of person. Birds of a feather flock together. You are indistinguishable from one another. Hearing my words, Daniel shot to his feet, his chest heaving with uncontrolled anger. He glared at me, completely speechless. I knew precisely what he was thinking. Don't push your luck. Don't mistake my kindness for weakness. And just as I expected, the next second he grabbed his coat from the chair and slammed the door shut on his way out, undoubtedly on his way to find his supposed soulmate. If I refused to be obedient and compliant, there was always someone else who would be willing to cater to his every whim. I had just woken up when I received the news about Daniel's car accident. For a fleeting moment, I couldn't distinguish whether I was awake or still dreaming. My assistant called to inform me that Daniel was in the intensive care unit after a crash. His injuries were severe, and the doctors were predicting that he would remain in a coma for an extended period. I shook my head forcefully, trying to dispel the fog in my mind, but it only seemed to make things feel more surreal. I splashed my face with cold water, and finally the reality of the situation began to sink in. This was a gift from fate. This was the perfect opportunity for me to act. This was not the scenario I had originally planned for him, but destiny had intervened with impeccable timing. I took a deep, steadying breath, allowing a feeling of profound relief to wash over me. I immediately began to put into motion the plan I had been developing for so long, the complete and utter destruction of the company. First, I addressed the necessary legal procedures. With Daniel medically unable to perform his duties as the company's legal representative, I assumed his role. Concurrently, all the signing authority that constituted actual control over the company's finances and operations fell into my hands. Then, I began my work. My first move was to use all of the company's liquid assets to issue dividend payments to the shareholders. They raised no objections. In fact, they had been wanting a payout for years, but Daniel had always used his authority to block it at board meetings. I gave them 8 years' worth of dividends in a single payment. They were all beaming with joy. Not only did they recover their entire initial investment, but they also walked away with a substantial profit. With the shareholders satisfied, they had no interest in what I did next, which gave me complete freedom to operate. Second, I sold off all the company's raw materials and fixed assets. I used the proceeds from these sales to offer extremely generous severance packages to all of our employees. The compensation I provided was unprecedented, a true golden parachute. That, however, only consumed a portion of the funds. The remainder was needed to cover the penalties for breach of contract. The company had several major clients, and with its operations ceasing, I would be unable to fulfill their orders. According to the terms of our contracts, I was obligated to pay a penalty for non-fulfillment. With those payments made, the company was effectively hollowed out. Seeing the clients that Daniel had worked so hard to acquire, the ones he had developed stomach ulcers from drinking to win over, all scatter and disappear, I felt an immense and incredible sense of satisfaction. Making him poor was synonymous with breaking his spirit. He had grown accustomed to a life of luxury and extravagance, and a fall from that height would be a psychological blow from which he could never recover. I eagerly anticipated watching him suffer. He had always treated his family as if it were disposable. Once his economic foundation was destroyed, his entire world would come crashing down. I hoped he would truly appreciate the experience. And I couldn't wait to watch him and Sarah inevitably turn on each other like trapped animals once the money was gone. I had a strong feeling that they would. As a couple, we held the largest share of the company's stock, so we received the largest dividend payout. Now the question was, how to dispose of this enormous sum of cash. My initial thought was to donate it all to charity, but I was concerned that Daniel might sue to have the donation reversed, claiming I had disposed of joint marital assets without his consent. So I devised another plan. I began purchasing surplus agricultural produce from farmers who were unable to sell their fruit. Then, I simply let it all spoil in a warehouse. I also mortgaged the factory's equipment and land and spent that money as well. As for my own financial security, I had been preparing for this day since I first discovered Daniel's affair 3 years prior. I had him purchase gold jewelry for me, which is not considered a divisible asset in a divorce proceeding. I bought real estate for my parents and other family members, structuring the transactions as voluntary gifts. Under the pretense of making investments, I had been methodically siphoning small amounts of money into a branch of a company I had established in Africa. The financial records were now a complicated mess, and honestly, even I had difficulty making sense of them. But the underlying foundation was solid, and I still maintained control over it. I couldn't invest a large sum at once because Daniel wasn't a fool. Money sent to Africa was essentially beyond his reach, and he never would have approved such a large transfer. So, I had to do it incrementally, like an ant moving its home one grain of sand at a time. Now, our family's fortune was gone, but I had created a backdoor for myself, positioning me for a future comeback. Everything I did was carefully executed within the bounds of the law. Illegally transferring marital assets during a divorce is a serious offense, and I was not going to risk that. All that remained was to wait for Daniel to wake up. I hoped he would enjoy his new life, having come into the world with nothing and now leaving it with nothing. I truly couldn't wait for the performance to begin. I sat by Daniel's hospital bed with one ear listening to my lawyer's phone update on the progress of clawing back marital assets from Sarah, while my other hand was busy arranging for the funds to be spent on backlogged agricultural products as quickly as possible. Everything had to be executed with speed. By the time Daniel regained consciousness, I wanted to ensure that not a single penny remained. I let out a sigh. It wasn't that I didn't feel a twinge of regret. I had started this company from nothing, building it all by myself. I was the original founder. Was I happy about this scorched earth approach? Of course not. I simply felt I had been left with no other choice. But before Daniel woke up, Sarah appeared. She was typically the type to quietly accumulate wealth, only daring to taunt me through text messages after her second child was born. This was the first time she had ever confronted me face to face. She may not have much formal education, but she is perceptive. As a mistress, she operates at a high level. She stormed into the room filled with rage, but the moment she saw me, she couldn't maintain eye contact. Finally, she gathered her courage. "You're insane," she said. "You're doing all of this just to get back at me. Is it worth it? All of this for someone like me?" At that moment, I was toying with a set of building blocks that Daniel had bought for her daughter. The second she finished speaking, I pulled out the bottom layer of the block tower. It collapsed with a clatter, leaving a pile of ruins on the table. I looked up at her and smiled. "This is what you call a beauty that topples nations." Do you like it? You should feel proud. You wanted Daniel to divorce me and split the assets, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. So, I did it for him. Now the two of you can get married. Aren't you happy? And don't pretend this is just for you. You have your shameless parents supporting you and your illegitimate children beside you. I want you to have nothing. I want them to have nothing too. I want to make sure that what goes around comes around. Karma was moving too slowly, so I decided to give it a little push. I don't care about the garbage I'm giving you, but I can't stand to see a conniving, small-minded person like you get ahead by doing nothing. You are mediocre. Your only talents are being thick-skinned and having a black heart. And for someone like you, I orchestrated this grand masterpiece. Don't you think life is just wonderful? I looked at her with endless mockery, a constant smile fixed on my face. I laughed so hard that tears began to well up in my eyes. She wiped away a tear of her own and spat out a threat. You just wait until Daniel wakes up. We'll see how he deals with you. I burst out laughing. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. A king without a kingdom is just a regular man. When he wakes up, he'll be a nobody, unable to even take care of himself. Watching Sarah's retreating figure, I felt nothing but a sense of exhilarating release. The last bit of resentment I held vanished into thin air. A great man once said you must have the courage to smash the old world. In the final moments before the empire fell, I went to the most luxurious hotel on the Bund in Shanghai and ordered a table full of food. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window holding a glass of wine, gazing out at the bustling, vibrant city below. The Huangpu River flowed ceaselessly to the sea, day and night, flanked by towering skyscrapers whose light shows dazzled the eye. Decades of economic boom, and this was its glittering essence. Looking back, I was overwhelmed with emotion. Going back about 10 years to the early 2000s, no one knew the hardships of starting a business better than I did. Daniel and I were college sweethearts who got married with nothing to our names. There was no other way. I came from a poor family in the countryside, a classic story of a girl trying to make it. And he was just an average guy whose mom had been laid off and whose dad supported the family. We were in the same school, same department, same class. After graduation, we both got jobs at the same state-run company. After less than 2 years, the company started restructuring. To be considerate, they said they wouldn't lay off both of us. One of us could stay. In our small, dark, cramped apartment, we sat in silence. Finally, he took my hand. "I'll leave," he said. "I'm the man. I should be the one to go out and make something of myself." I shook my head. "This place isn't stable. This is just the first wave of cuts. Didn't your uncle say he could get you transferred? That's a real job for life over there. So I should be the one to go." Through teary eyes, Daniel choked out, "Don't be scared. Whatever we have, we'll split it 50-50. I nodded slowly, my heart filled with both confusion and fear. I was an accountant at the state-owned company, but the work there was so specialized. As a materials accountant, I didn't even know how to fill out a check. Naturally, when I started looking for a new job, I hit a wall everywhere I went. I wasn't ready to give up. I took every interview opportunity I could find. One day, I ended up at a construction company far from home. The interview was at a construction site. It wasn't raining when I left home, but by the time I got there, it was pouring. I trudged toward the office, my feet sinking into the mud. Then, I slipped and fell into a deep pit. At the hospital, they found a bone bruise on my knee and a torn ligament. I needed to rest. Money flowed out like water, and our savings quickly dried up. Daniel started borrowing money from everyone he knew. I saw it with my own eyes. His lips chapped, his hands trembling as he passed the money through the payment window. But when he turned to look at me, his eyes were full of relief. It's strange. Life was so hard back then, but I never felt lost, disappointed, or in pain. They say poverty and illness go hand in hand. But there's another saying, after the darkest night comes the dawn. The construction company called and asked when I could start. I had been hired. I excitedly told them I just needed 2 weeks to recover, but I wouldn't be able to do any strenuous activity for the next 3 months. The doctor had actually said 6 months of rest, but I couldn't wait. We were in debt, and I couldn't just sit at home. My job was still managing materials. My predecessor had left a mess of the books, so I had to handle the daily operations while cleaning up his disaster. It was incredibly difficult, and I often worked late into the night, burning the midnight oil. I knew how hard this job was to come by, so I had no complaints. But sometimes the old accounting errors would inevitably cause me to make new ones. It made me panic. Yet I noticed the suppliers didn't seem to care. Some had competent accountants who would correct my mistakes. Others never even noticed. Later, a colleague told me that these bosses were all making a killing with very high profit margins. I quietly took note. One of the suppliers, a man named Mark, was in the cable tray business. I realized his accountant was part-time, which led to frequent errors. When I made a mistake, he made a mistake. We often ended up sweating over the books together, and that's how we got to know each other. Later, Mark told me he was planning to open a retail store and wanted me to manage it as his agent. He asked if I was interested. The thought of quitting my job made my head spin, but the thought of making real money, big money, made my heart race. I went home to discuss it with Daniel. He was clearly against it. We just paid off our debts. Can't you just take it easy for a while? I nodded without arguing, but the idea had already taken root. I quit my job in secret and went to work with Mark. I was in charge of sales at the storefront while Mark went to construction sites to drum up business. My salary was a base plus commission. I soon found out that Mark had a small factory behind the scenes, making the cable trays himself. He wasn't an agent for a big southern factory like he boasted, but that was none of my business. I just quietly did my job at the store. To increase sales, my mind was constantly racing. It was simple. If my sales weren't high enough, my monthly salary would be even less than what I made as an accountant. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't be a drag on our little family again. The pressure was immense. My hair started falling out in clumps. When sales were slow, I'd regret quitting my stable job. Eventually, I adjusted my mindset and stopped beating myself up. I learned on the job. In my free time, I asked around for marketing tips for the shop. But my experience was limited, and my methods were basic. Besides cable trays, the store sold other hardware products. Everything was neatly arranged and well-stocked, but many customers would just come in, take a look, and leave. No matter how enthusiastically I greeted them, they remained aloof. In short, they were unwilling to share any information, and I couldn't get a conversation started. I was so anxious, I got a cold sore on my lip. But there was something I could do. I started a logbook. I recorded the time, what kind of customer came in, what they were wearing, and what they asked about, all in detail. Then I'd give it to Mark. The first time I handed my work to him, the shock on his face was unmistakable. Then he slowly sat down and read it carefully, his finger tapping the table from time to time. After a while, he looked up at me, his face lit with surprise. "You mean these people are likely procurement staff from construction sites? I'm always running around sites trying to find clients, and you're giving me leads." I nodded. A huge smile spread across Mark's face. He said good several times in a row. My efforts paid off with Mark's success. Running sales at unfamiliar construction sites, he often struggled to find the right contacts and frequently came back empty-handed. With my guidance, he could quickly locate the decision-makers and knew what they needed in advance. He didn't have to close every deal. Just one extra sale was enough to boost the month's performance. At the end of the month, Mark gave me a bonus. "You're a real genius," he said. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. My own sales hadn't seen much improvement yet. But seeing Mark's success gave me confidence in myself. After some time and experimentation, I realized that customers were most guarded when they first walked in the door. The most important thing was to get them to relax quickly and build a tiny bit of trust. I developed a script to lower their defenses. For instance, "You're my first customer today. I wonder if we'll be able to do some business together." Don't underestimate that sentence. It actually conveys several layers of meaning. It was the result of combining practical experience with theory. As it turned out, my hard work paid off. My store's sales became the best in the entire hardware and electronics market. Much later, looking back from a high vantage point, I could see that I had laid the foundation of that building with my own two hands. Later, when Daniel was throwing money around at parties and his mistress was buying shoes and bags worth tens of thousands, all that luxury was built on the painstaking, drop by drop accumulation of my early efforts. I worked that hard to make myself happy, not to make some other woman happy. This feeling of having built a wedding dowry for someone else was absolutely terrible. Even if Daniel did play a key role later on, I wasn't completely against splitting the assets in a divorce. But in the end, I just couldn't stomach it. I could give the money to charity, but I couldn't hand it over to enable wicked people. My hard work made the hardware store's business flourish, but nothing in this world moves in a straight line forever. Mark had a family emergency back home and had to close his business here. He left in a hurry. Unable to sell the store, he simply transferred it to me and let me pay him in installments. After we settled the final accounts, he said to me with a sigh, "I wish we could have kept working together. I just thought he was making small talk." He turned to leave and quickly started his car. I noticed he had left his wallet behind and rushed out after him. He got out of the car. It was dark, and I couldn't see his expression clearly. He took the wallet and suddenly said in a deep voice, "That wife of mine, all she knows is eating, drinking, and playing mahjong. It started with small bets, but then it got bigger and bigger, and she even got into serious gambling. I'm going back this time to clean up the mess and divorce her. Also, my brother's factory is doing really well, way beyond my small-time operation. He said he'd help me. With his capital and connections, plus my ability, I'm sure I have a bright future ahead of me. If, and this is a big if, everything goes smoothly for me, would you be willing to come find me?" I stood there, stunned. His words were a lot to process. He explained further, I mean, when the time comes, you come find me and we can start by dating. What do you think? Knowing you, getting married right away wouldn't be out of the question either." "Wait," I interrupted him urgently. "I'm a married woman. What are you talking about?" He waved his hand dismissively. "The men around here, they act all high and mighty, but they don't have much ambition. They're content with their dead-end salaries and their cushy, secure jobs. I look down on them. I think with your talent, you're bound to be successful someday. It's only a matter of time before you and your husband go your separate ways." I was utterly shocked by his words, completely speechless. He glanced at me again. "Loyalty is a good thing, but too much of it is just being stubborn. With me, even if you don't want to be a housewife and still want to build a career, I can help you cut 10 years off the struggle. Think about it. I'll wait for your answer." With that, he got back in his car and sped off, disappearing into the night. He left me standing there, dumbfounded. A moment later, a figure emerged from the nearby shadows. A low, hoarse voice called my name. "Eleanor." It was Daniel. I was shocked and surprised. I had no idea how much of my conversation with Mark he had heard. Mark and I had always been professional, never crossing any lines. I had never even thought of him in any other way than as a business partner. But this one time, in a moment of excitement, he had said those things, and of all people, Daniel had been there to hear it. And how did he know I worked here? When did he find out? My head was spinning. I quickly invited Daniel inside to talk. He nodded numbly and followed me in. First, I tried to reassure him. I said sincerely, "Mark is going back to his hometown and never coming back. He was just talking nonsense. We're just business partners. I've never thought about him romantically." Then, I quickly opened my messaging app and showed him my chat history with Mark. Everything on it was perfectly normal. Daniel stared at it for a long time. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red, his expression a mixture of hurt and restraint. I hurried to explain why I'd changed jobs, laying out my thoughts honestly and offering a profound self-criticism. I said, changing jobs was a huge risk, especially since getting the materials accountant job at the construction site was already a big break. It was wrong of me not to discuss it with you. That's why I've been on edge this whole time, telling myself that failure is not an option. But I don't regret it. I've learned a deep truth in life. If you're not moving forward, you're falling behind. While you're resting, content with an ordinary life, there's always someone out there fighting, striving for more. Daniel thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. That's how exceptional people think. I was too satisfied with the status quo. He sighed deeply, full of emotion, and looked at me with admiration. There was also a hint of feeling inadequate. I shook my head and took his hand. You've been my stable rock through all of this. Then I added, I'm just getting started. I'm far from exceptional. You're speaking too soon. I don't take compliments well. He said thoughtfully, I'll work hard to be better too. I won't let you look down on me, I promise. Just as I am proud of you, I'll make sure you're never ashamed of me. And so our relationship became even stronger than before. You see, his thinking was so simple back then. He just didn't want me to look down on him. But later, everything changed beyond recognition. Years later, when Daniel was juggling women, treating his home like a hotel and his marriage like a joke, I would always remember that evening. I could feel that what Mark had said after holding it in for so long was no joke. When I was young, I could have used my own abilities to take a shortcut. What I rejected was more than just the thrill of an affair. I gave up a ladder to climb higher. If I had been willing to lower my moral standards, I could have saved myself a lot of hardship in the future. The temptations outside of marriage came one after another, but I held firm to my family and my principles. So when Daniel got rich and turned bad, easily abandoning his moral compass, I just couldn't understand it. Is it really that hard to be faithful to one person for a lifetime? I did it, didn't I? When it was his turn, why couldn't he? The day Mark left, Daniel happened to show up, so I laid all my cards on the table. It was a relief in a way. I was tired of constantly lying about being at my old job. I brought my younger brother, Michael, over from our hometown. After graduating from a community college, he'd found a job in our local city. This time, I specifically asked him to come and help me. He watched the store, which freed me up to visit construction sites. All our money was tied up in the business, so I couldn't afford a car. In the beginning, I actually took the bus to make sales calls. After getting off the bus, I often had to walk a long way to find the construction site. I was exposed to the elements, often hungry and exhausted, and had to travel long distances. During those days, it was my unwavering belief in my goals that got me through. Thankfully, my foundational work was solid, and I wasn't running the business on whims. Business was booming. The day I got my driver's license and bought a car, I cried my eyes out. Finally, I didn't have to measure the earth with my own 2 feet anymore. But emotional hardship is tougher than physical hardship. More than the long treks, what was harder to bear was the disdain of others. Although I had established business with a few sites, every time I visited a new one or met a new client, I was usually met with condescending looks, and sometimes I was even thrown out. What kept me going was nothing but conviction. Fortunately, all my efforts were rewarded. I knew in my heart that I was on the right path, which motivated me to work even harder. Moreover, a vice president at a construction company, Mr. Chen, particularly appreciated me. He told me that the hardware store business would continue to shrink because more and more agents from big factories were approaching them directly, even going after smaller construction projects. He suggested I get into 2 projects, floor tiles and waterproofing. Both of these were projects that construction companies always subcontracted out. Build a small factory, produce the products, then take on the subcontracted work from builders and do the installation myself. They were all low investment, quick return, low barrier to entry projects. At the end of the year, my brother brought his fiancée home for me to meet. I took the opportunity to announce my plan. My sister-in-law would watch the store, my brother would continue to visit construction sites, and I would use the money we earned to open a new factory. At that time, floor tiles were in high demand everywhere, but there were no local tile factories. All the tiles were shipped from the next city over. I had stumbled upon a golden opportunity. Money, real money, started pouring in. Later, I heard someone say that for a person to really take off and succeed, it really only takes 2 or 3 years. That statement couldn't be more true. With the money I earned, besides expanding the tile factory and bringing in new equipment, I also invested in the waterproofing business. Once I got into waterproofing, I realized just how high the profit margins were. It was a real cash cow. And there was huge room for improvement. There were too few good waterproofing materials on the market. Many materials required a lot of maintenance later on, and you'd get your quality deposit docked. Later, as floor tiles were gradually phased out, waterproofing materials remained. With a lot of cash on hand, I started R&D for new waterproofing materials. By the time I dismantled the company, I had developed a secret formula for a waterproofing material, a result of my collaboration with a university professor. During this time, Daniel was busy hopping from one woman's bed to another, busy having illegitimate children, and paid absolutely no attention to what I was doing. He didn't give me a second thought. And after the divorce, this secret formula would be one of my projects for a comeback. Later, a contractor from our hometown found my brother and wanted to partner with us on a project. By this time, I was completely familiar with the construction industry. We formed a construction team, established a company, and started dealing directly with developers. We weren't a knockoff operation. The estimators, construction staff, and technical backbone were all highly reputable engineers I had scouted over the years. I paid top dollar to poach them, not only to meet the national qualifications for a construction enterprise, but also to strive for technical excellence and client satisfaction. In the beginning, I could only build a few small multi-story buildings. After making some money, opportunity and challenges arrived at the same time. I could now build high-rises, but I was short on capital. One tower crane can build 4 high-rises simultaneously, but I only had enough money for 2. This would be a waste, as tower cranes are quite expensive. I gritted my teeth and took out a loan. 4 buildings it was. It was a gamble, all or nothing. If the funding chain broke and I failed, all my previous efforts would be for nothing. Fortunately, I caught the wave of the fastest years of development. Riding that tailwind, I succeeded. To quickly recoup their investment, the developer gave me one of the buildings as payment, what they call a property for debt swap. From signing the contract to the property being registered in my name, it happened to coincide with a rapid surge in housing prices. My assets multiplied several times over, suddenly pushing me into the 9-figure range. I could now take on even larger construction projects. Looking back, that was my most glorious year and a turning point in my career. One day, I went to inspect a construction site with my entourage. A piece of construction debris fell from the sky and hit my hard hat. I passed out. In the hospital, I woke up to Daniel's concerned gaze. His eyes were bloodshot, his expression tense. The hospital's conclusion was that there was a shadow on my head that needed further examination. My shoulder joint was damaged, my arm was fractured, and various joints throughout my body were dislocated, requiring a long period of rehabilitation. The night was deep, but the hospital room was brightly lit. The window clearly reflected my image. I was wearing a patient's gown, my face grim, my expression desolate. On that very day, we decided that Daniel would take over my work. I would go home to rest and also prepare for pregnancy. At that time, Daniel had made a bit of a name for himself in the state-owned enterprise. But what was that position compared to being the boss of a construction company? I was out there making waves while he became my logistical support. I was shooting up like a rocket. I could see the longing in his eyes, mixed with his blessings. I could sense his unwillingness to be left behind, but he never said anything. This incident was no accident. I had risen too fast and gotten in someone's way. Daniel would now have to face the same dangers I did. We had a long talk. I said, "I want to entrust the company to you. I have hundreds of employees who depend on me for their livelihood. We can only move forward, not back. I want to find someone capable to lead them, and you're more suitable than Michael for that, but the risks are also great. If you're not willing, I'll have Michael take over." Daniel gripped my hand tightly, his eyes red, and nodded firmly. "You rest and recover. I will not fail you." Not fail me. But in the end, he failed even me. Sometimes when I think back on his vow that day, I laugh until tears stream down my face. After saying that, he choked up again and said haltingly, "You've suffered so much all these years. For a grown man like me to be sheltered by you, it's been hard for me too. Now it's my time to step up. Don't worry, I will make the company bigger and stronger. I will be a man who stands tall. I know a lot of people are laughing at you. A woman out there fighting. Their words mock my incompetence. From now on, I will show you. I will take good care of my wife, and you will live under my protection." What did I do then? I was moved beyond words. Thinking about it now, it's just utterly ridiculous. He ended up taking very good care of his mistress and her family. He used me as a stepping stone to climb to a higher peak, and from then on, he never thought about taking care of me. He figured I could take care of myself. He saw more people and more things, and from then on, I was no longer in his eyes. How times change. I began a life of semi-rest. After the initial treatment, I started a long period of physical therapy. After the first phase of rehab, my doctor advised me to live as normally as possible. Even though a lot of activity would make me uncomfortable, I had to grit my teeth and persevere. I wanted to travel to clear my head. Daniel was supportive. He picked things up quickly. As expected of an elite trained by a large corporation, his management was more thorough, more detailed, and better at rallying people than mine. Compared to his refined management style, mine did have a bit of an amateurish feel, but I was still leagues better than the other contractors. As a result, our construction company became formidably strong. After surviving intense and even brutal competition from our peers, Daniel finally integrated successfully into the company, becoming the chairman in the truest sense. When it was time for year-end bonuses, he didn't buy anything for himself. He only asked me what I wanted. I said, "All these years, I've owed my family too much. I want to improve their living conditions." Without a second thought, he bought a large house for my parents and a pile of jewelry and luxury goods for me. As for my brother, he had his own shares, but Daniel still gave him a generous gift. I said to Daniel sincerely, "This is enough jewelry and luxury goods. Don't buy any more next time. It's enough for appearances. You'll be going to more social events in the future. We should buy some things for you." He was so moved he pulled me into a hug filled with emotion. To have a wife like you, what more could a man ask for? I smiled and hugged him back tightly, our hearts close. I don't care about these things. My sights are set on the stars and the sea. His chest vibrated with laughter. I get it, honey. You want a yacht. Only a yacht can satisfy your desire to see both the stars and the sea. We both burst out laughing again. That was probably the best time in our relationship. As for what came later, there was no later. The money I didn't spend, another woman helped me spend, using my hard-earned cash to buy luxury goods lavishly. And the yacht. We bought it, but we only took it out a few times. By then, my joints were already bad, and the sea breeze made them ache so much I could barely stand. And so it was this yacht, which failed to witness the fulfillment of our vows, that instead witnessed the entire process of Daniel's corruption and fall. As for how many women had been on that yacht, I'd lost count, but at that moment, I was glad I had made that decision. Daniel was not only able to hold his position as chairman, lead his capable team, and balance various relationships, but most importantly, he could get along with the heads of the development companies. To be honest, the construction industry is a man's world. As a woman, if I wasn't willing to use my charm, I would just be marginalized. Daniel was different. His career in the state-owned enterprise had perfectly honed his skills in handling interpersonal relationships. He navigated all sorts of dinners and drinking parties and indeed secured many projects for the company. The company expanded rapidly and our assets grew quickly. On Daniel's birthday, we gathered the whole family, raised our glasses in a toast, and cheered together. 10 years of hard work had finally paid off. All our friends and family were happy for us. What I didn't expect was that this gathering would be our last happy one. After that, we would never again gather together on good terms. At the time, it just seemed like an ordinary day. When it comes to building a business, I went from 0 to 1, and he went from 1 to 10. Which is more important? The answer is obviously the former, but Daniel clearly didn't see it that way. He got arrogant very quickly. He thought that apart from being able to endure hardship and having good luck, I had nothing else. In reality, if I had taken a single wrong step over the years, I would never have gotten to where I was. He completely overlooked my unique vision, sharp intuition, and boundless drive. He even looked down on Vice President Chen, the man who had formally brought me into the industry. Once at a dinner, he mocked him. It's been so many years, even my wife has made it big, and he's still just a vice president. When I heard about it, I immediately blew up at him. Back then, he still listened to me. Knowing he had messed up, He went to Chen's home with a lavish gift to apologize but was turned away at the door. He just clicked his tongue, smacked his lips, and left unconcerned. I only found out later that he had failed to get the man's forgiveness. At the time, I was in Yunnan, traveling and scouting for projects. I tried a local herbal tea from a pharmaceutical company there and thought it was fantastic. I wanted to become a distributor for this tea. After several meetings, they ultimately turned me down. Besides the deposit and other financial requirements that I could meet, they required 5 years of experience in the fast-moving consumer goods, FMCG industry. I thought about it for a long time and decided to start from scratch again, officially entering the FMCG sector. If I couldn't work with the big manufacturers, I would start as a distributor for smaller factories. Once I had enough experience, I would approach the Yunnan pharmaceutical company again. At the same time, I immediately bought shares in that company. I was optimistic about their business prospects. In just over a year, their stock price doubled. Later, I would reflect on this with great emotion. Even while I was seriously ill and recovering, I never stopped creating value and increasing our family's wealth. But all of that was just paving the way for Daniel's affair. When it came to spending money, I was no match for him. The first time I heard he was cheating, I couldn't believe it. I thought they were just rumors. Then a photo was sent to my WhatsApp. I had so many contacts at that point, I couldn't even remember who this person was. In the photo, at a dinner party, a slender, fashionably dressed girl was sitting on Daniel's lap. The look in his eyes as he gazed at her was one of infatuation. I scoffed internally. It was just a matter of camera angle. Daniel wouldn't betray me. I knew the social scene was messy, but I trusted Daniel. Besides, who would be so kind as to send me this information? I didn't believe in such good Samaritans. I was proven wrong so quickly. Soon after, a video arrived. An SUV was parked on a tropical beach. Daniel and a girl got out of the car. Daniel, with a look of delight, opened the trunk and looked expectantly at the girl beside him. She gasped, covering her mouth in surprise. The camera zoomed in. The trunk was filled with a stunning arrangement of flowers of all kinds, dazzling, brilliant, exotic. Many of them I had never seen before. The moment the trunk opened, a firework shot into the air. The handsome couple looked up at the sky, the sound of waves crashing in the background. When the fireworks faded, Daniel, like a magician, produced another bouquet of flowers and handed it to the girl, who was beaming with continuous surprises. She accepted the flowers with a shy smile, her slender, fair hands like delicate green onions. I couldn't help but look at my own hands, rough and calloused. If I neglected them even a little, they would get hangnails, rough enough to snag fine silk. These hands had touched stainless steel flanges, pipe elbows, cable trays, and all kinds of nuts and bolts, but they had never touched delicate flowers, and it wasn't over. There was a bonus clip at the end of the video. Guided by Daniel, the girl found a ring in the bouquet. Daniel carefully slipped it on her finger, and she jumped for joy. I never thought something as sacred as a vow of love could be displayed in such a setting. Daniel had reached a new level of shamelessness. The feeling of sorrow was instantly replaced by rage. I messaged the person who sent the video. "Who are you?" the person confessed. She was the original Mistress, and the girl in the video was Mistress number 4. The original was upset about being replaced and decided to report it to me, the wife. In a fury, I booked the next flight to where the cheating couple was, only to find they were already gone. The beach scene had been the grand finale of their trip. I stared at the discarded firework shells on the beach, blackened and pathetic. They seemed to be mocking me. My anger reached its peak. I flew back home. As I walked through the door, Daniel came out of the kitchen holding a large bowl of beef soup. What a picture of domestic bliss. What a perfect family man. It had only been a few hours, yet he could switch between roles so effortlessly. I walked up and slapped him across the face. The sudden impact made him lose his grip on the soup bowl. It crashed to the floor, shattering into pieces, soup splashing everywhere. He froze, completely stunned, and didn't react for a long moment. I walked briskly up the stairs. He stood below, looking up at me, and called out, "Honey, what happened?" I came back down, stood before him, and reached out to pick a piece of confetti from his hair. It still smelled of gunpowder from the fireworks. I placed it in my palm and flattened it out for him to see. His face changed color in an instant. After that, he apologized endlessly, repented profusely, and swore he would never do it again. "Honey, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll change. I promise I will," he said, his body trembling as if he truly couldn't bear to lose me. I said calmly, "Fine. Then I'll deal with the mistress. You stay out of it." He fell silent, his body stiff as if nailed to the floor. After a long pause, he said, "Honey, can we just let this go? I'll take care of our family from now on. I'll be good to you." I asked, "Why should I believe you? Do you have any credibility left?" He sounded like he was about to cry. "What do you want me to do?" Hatred churned inside me, but my voice remained calm. "Show me some sincerity." He nodded eagerly. "You name it, I'll do it." A mocking smile touched my lips. "Write a letter of guarantee. State in it that you cheated and that you're confessing of your own free will." I knew this letter would give me a slight advantage when it came to dividing assets in a divorce, but not much. But for now, I didn't know what else I could do to benefit myself. He said, "Okay, I'll write it." As he wrote, I added, "And at the end, add a sentence. If you do it again, you'll leave with nothing." He looked up at me sharply, his face a mask of disbelief. He refused. I nodded in understanding. That was the extent of his sincerity, the limit of his apology. He was already preparing for his next mistake. He was a snake. I couldn't blame myself for being ruthless. I turned and walked upstairs. He was still shouting behind me. "Honey, we can talk about this." "Don't go. Let's discuss it." I ignored him. But then a thought occurred to me. Did I really want to rush into a divorce like this? No, I needed to retreat in an organized, planned manner. So I turned around and faced him again. "So, if you do it again, how do you plan to punish yourself?" He took my hand, saying earnestly, "Honey, I won't do it again." I let out a small, sharp laugh. "We're negotiating a contract right now. The subject is how to maintain our current marriage. As the guilty party, what are your penalty clauses?" We had reached this point. What was the use of pretending to be affectionate? He hesitated for a long moment before saying, "If I do it again, you get an extra 10% of the assets in the divorce," he asked tentatively. I laughed out loud. "I have proof you cheated. Even if this goes to court, I'm entitled to a larger share anyway." His face paled slightly, but he continued to negotiate. "How about 20%? I was losing patience. "You're a grown man. What's with all this dithering? Don't have faith in yourself? If we divorce, I want half of your share of the assets." What do you say? Dare to put that money on the line as a guarantee? He hesitated for a long time, but to get through the moment, he had no choice but to sign the agreement. This was just the first step. It was a temporary truce. Since he hadn't met my initial condition, I wouldn't be merciful to the mistress. I hired some people to teach her a lesson, humiliating her in public and making sure she couldn't work as a model anymore. But it was useless. This mistress was a pro. She knew how to handle wives like me and had a very high tolerance for pressure. On the surface, she looked pathetic. Someone sent me a video of her getting her hair pulled and being verbally abused. It was all meant to shame her, but in the final shot of the video, she straightened up, flicked her hair, and had a look of complete indifference on her face. She lost her job, so Daniel started supporting her completely. He kept saying he would change, but it was all just talk. He had probably already calculated it. By giving up half of his share upon divorce, he could placate me and give me a sense of security so he wouldn't lose me. Why was he so keen on keeping me? Because I was capable and valuable. Business has its ups and downs. People have their highs and lows. If he ever faced a setback, I could support him. The best-case scenario for him was for me to turn a blind eye, to slowly boil the frog and tacitly accept his cheating while he kept all his assets and me, his powerful ally. The worst-case scenario was that he couldn't appease me and we'd divorce. But with the capital he had left and the experience and connections he'd built over the years, he could easily make a comeback. Climbing up by stepping on someone else's shoulders is always easier. I was his stepping stone. The more I thought about it, the more resentful I became. The wives in our circle all kept in touch, forming a network. They were the ones who told me that Daniel had started supporting the mistress completely. At this point, the only thing I was thankful for was that I would no longer be deceived by Daniel. I could now get first-hand information. A legal wife having to rely on a mistress's tip-off to find out about mistress number 4 was just too pathetic. And the orchestrator of all this was Daniel. I had trusted him so much, and he taught me a harsh lesson. I would not let him get away with it. At the company's annual party, Daniel was on stage giving a speech, something he excelled at. Compared to us grunts who had clawed our way up from the bottom, his unscripted speeches were brilliant. The audience erupted in thunderous applause. A short while later, just as Daniel was reaching the climax of his speech, the huge screen behind him suddenly started playing that video, the one of him and the mistress on that romantic beach. Daniel was in the latter half of his climax, about to wrap up, when he noticed the audience's response was not what he expected. He followed their gaze and turned around. After watching for a moment, he quietly turned back, his eyes fixed on me. He wasn't furious, nor was he ashamed. The anger and blame in his eyes shot towards me like arrows. I watched the scene unfold with a calm smile on my face. I knew in my heart that this was it. Daniel and I were officially done. He wouldn't think he was wrong. He deserved this. He would only blame me. It was a matter of character. It was a separate issue from whether or not he could resist temptation. The originally lively atmosphere in the room turned deathly silent. No one knew what would happen next. I sat there silently, unmoving, watching Daniel stand on stage, trapped and embarrassed. But Daniel was a capable man, and he had a team of capable people under him. A newly hired vice president, known for being a smooth operator, was called upon to handle the crisis. He walked onto the stage and tried to smooth things over. Let's also ask the missus to say a few words. After all, she's the company's founder. We're all here today because of her. His words were a clear message telling me to be the bigger person, to consider the big picture. I walked onto the stage and took the microphone. In a mix of real and feigned emotion, I suddenly choked up. I said, I believe that in this company, when it comes to dedication and contribution, the person who most deserves the flowers and applause is me, not some woman I don't even know. After that, feigning being too emotional to speak, I walked off the stage. Now everyone knew Daniel and I were completely finished. There was no turning back. The vice president stood beside me, stunned. He never expected me to take such a scorched earth approach. Having taken things this far, my natural next step was to kick Daniel out of the chairman's seat. I couldn't say it outright, so I had to act out, cloaking my intentions in a fit of jealousy. This tactic was far more clever than formally demanding his resignation. Daniel probably couldn't guess that I was also afraid of divorce, not of losing him, but of him walking away with capital and connections. I had worked so hard, starting from nothing, only to share the fruits of my labor with him. It was too easy for him. That was something I could never accept. Even if he only took a quarter of our assets, I was afraid he'd use it to launch himself to new heights. I refused to be someone else's stepping stone. That's just the kind of person I am. After the public spectacle I made at the annual party, Daniel really couldn't hold on to his position as chairman. A public fallout with his wife, whose brother still held a significant stake in the company, he couldn't stay. So he proactively resigned as chairman, returning the position to me. I thought my scheme had succeeded, but Daniel was no fool. I wouldn't be able to sit securely in this position for long. I quickly understood why. The company's business had expanded significantly, and there were many clients I didn't know. Daniel had already cultivated relationships with all of these partners. Now I was in a bind. New clients were giving me a hard time, and several board members and employees were waiting to see how I'd perform. Many contracts had deadlines, and I couldn't solve these problems in a short amount of time. I began to realize I had miscalculated this time. Daniel had outplayed me, but it didn't matter. The game was far from over. Daniel offered an olive branch at the right moment, and I took the easy way out. He was reappointed as chairman, but I got to appoint the chief financial officer. This made the finances transparent, and his spending would be reined in. In other words, it would be nearly impossible for him to lavishly support a mistress in the future. This was his guarantee to me, his show of sincerity. For now, I had to retreat and plan my next move. Daniel did behave himself for a while. Frankly, whether he behaved or not, I couldn't be bothered to care. As long as he didn't touch my money, I could take my time planning my next move. As for him as a person, after getting to know him on a deeper level, I felt like I had never truly known him at all. I just treated him like a stranger. All those good years we had were just a joke. But it didn't matter. The world is a chaotic stage, and everyone runs into a few scumbags. Later, Mrs. Lynn, a friend I was relatively close with, came to talk to me. She was always sincere. "You might feel like you've gotten your revenge," she said, "but you've also erased any guilt the man might have felt. As wives, when we have an excellent man by our side, we have to learn to handle him like a kite, knowing when to let out the string and when to pull it back in. That's the only way it can last." Then, as if remembering something, she had a realization. "Oh, you're different from us. In your family, you're the one who started from scratch. So it's only natural that you're not willing to accept this." She hesitated, then added, "But you have to think about the illegitimate child. Don't let him have a son over there before you even have a child of your own." I asked, confused, "What illegitimate child?" As far as I knew, these young models, to put it nicely, were just aspiring models. The real ones wouldn't stoop to this. These aspiring models were serial mistresses. They had their own strategies. When they encountered a determined wife like me, they knew they wouldn't get much, so they'd grab what they could and leave without a fight. Meeting my confused gaze, Mrs. Lynn asked again, "You really don't know?" I shook my head. She sighed. "That cashier in your group, Sarah, the one who's related to you, is now your husband's secretary." Pfft, what secretary? When there's work, the secretary does it. When there's no work, he does the secretary. Who doesn't know how that works? My dead heart suddenly turned ice cold again. Sarah's mom and my mom are cousins, so my blood relation to Sarah is actually quite distant. We didn't usually see each other much. A couple of years ago, Sarah's mom came to my house crying and complaining about how hard life was. Sarah has no education. She can't find a job. She's just been sitting at home, can't even find a husband. She was one step away from getting on her knees. My mom pleaded with me, and I finally agreed. Faced with this useless person, I first arranged for her to attend a training class to learn finance, get her professional certificate and a junior level certification, and only then did I arrange a job for her. I told Sarah's mom at the time, "Auntie, now Sarah has a skill. She'll have work experience here with me, and she'll be able to support herself in the future. You can rest easy." A person who couldn't survive in society was propped up by me. When Sarah's mom found out about my arrangements, she dropped to her knees right in front of me. And what now? She's learned to stab me in the back, too. No, how can these people treat right and wrong so lightly? Repaying kindness with malice seems to come so naturally to them. I quickly found out what Sarah had been up to. A developer had given us several villas to settle a debt. Villas are the hardest properties to liquidate, and they had been sitting on our hands for a long time. The villas belonged to the company, so ownership couldn't be easily transferred, but there was no rule about who could live in them. One of our partners was a renovation company. Daniel used a quid pro quo arrangement, having them renovate the villa for him in exchange for funneling business their way elsewhere. Then he used his own salary to support Sarah. What a brilliant move. I almost had to admire him. I also dug into how Sarah got close to Daniel, trying to know my enemy as well as myself. In fact, ever since Daniel started having a string of women, Sarah had gotten ideas. So she started making moves on him too. Daniel was one of the few wealthy men she could get close to, delivered right to her on a silver platter by me. Apparently, for a while, Sarah completely stopped wearing professional attire. Her supervisor, out of respect for me, never said anything. In the summer, rain or shine, she would wear chiffon dresses, the hems above her knees barely covering half her thighs. When the AC blew, the other half would be semi-exposed, and occasionally you could even get a glimpse of what was underneath. She paraded around like this in front of Daniel, and he quickly took the bait. But at that time, the quality of the young girls around Daniel was so high. Fair-skinned, beautiful, long-legged, Sarah was nothing special. Besides being shameless, she had no other talents. She was an insignificant presence in Daniel's harem. He didn't take her seriously at first, he slept with her, and that was it. But then I drove away all the beautiful girls around Daniel, leaving only her. This gave her the opportunity to shine. When Daniel was at his lowest, reeling from my renovation, she provided timely emotional support and gave him the masculine validation he craved. This greatly elevated her status in Daniel's eyes, making him willing to set her up in a house, have a second family with her, and even have children. One time, I happened to run into Daniel taking Sarah to a party. I stood outside their private room and heard Sarah chattering away in a cloying voice. My dear Daniel is so tired. He's under so much pressure. What's wrong with relaxing a little? She's so controlling. If she's so capable, why doesn't she do it herself? Even I, as her sister, can't stand her temper. What kind of woman is like that, always making trouble for her own man? What good does that do her? If you ask me, people should discuss things behind closed doors. Why air your dirty laundry in public? My Daniel respects her, but she doesn't appreciate it. The more he respects her, the more she acts up. They all burst out laughing. Daniel's voice was lazy and roguish. I just like young, fresh girls. What can I do? She's a washed-up old hag. She disgusts me. Then he touched Sarah's face. Sarah isn't exactly a beauty, but she has a feminine charm. She's understanding. I'm content. If my wife were half as gentle as Sarah, we wouldn't be in such a mess. Sarah, being touched in public like that, cooed, "Oh, Daniel." I pushed the door open and walked in. Sarah jumped, startled, and immediately stood up. Realizing her mistake, she awkwardly sat back down. Daniel's face turned cold, his posture defensive. I walked up to Sarah and slapped her. Tears immediately welled up in her eyes. Daniel shot up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "What are you doing?" he roared. He grabbed my wrist to stop me from hitting her again. I yanked my hand free. Daniel pulled Sarah behind him, but I had no intention of hitting her again. I raised my voice and said, "I'm here to correct her. She's my distant cousin. She should be calling you brother-in-law, not Daniel. She can't even get her family titles right. Don't you think she deserves a slap?" Daniel was silent. I continued, "She begged me for a job, but she's useless. I paid for her to learn accounting and then got her a job as a cashier. But I hear she's terrible at it and causes a lot of trouble for her colleagues. I hit her. Tell me, should I have?" I added, "I wanted her to learn a skill, to earn a living through her own labor. She didn't learn the skill well, but she's a first-class expert at seducing men and repaying kindness with malice. Is that something to be proud of? Is that what a decent person does?" I hit her. "What are you going to do about it? No matter how much you protect her, you can't change the fact that she's a despicable person. You—" Daniel's face was flushed with anger. Behind him, Sarah was sobbing. "Me what? What did I do?" I challenged. "I'm the one who should be angry having to deal with you two disgusting people. What are you so angry about?" Daniel laughed, a bitter, angry laugh. "Right. You're the greatest person in the world. Your character is so noble, we're not worthy." I sneered. "Character is something for others to judge, not for you to praise yourself. But my character is certainly not for you to judge, so shut your filthy mouth." I quickly went home. My parents, whom I had moved to the city to live with me, probably knew everything by now. My mother was asleep. My father pulled me aside. "Listen to me and don't fly off the handle. The other day, your aunt took your mom out. She said your brother-in-law bought Sarah a villa and the decorations were incredibly lavish. She wanted your mom to go see it. They're really gloating, aren't they? The things they said were so nasty. Said you couldn't keep a man, that Sarah was the capable one. You know, we're just ordinary people. How did they learn to change their tune so fast? It's like they're acting in a play. Your mom got sick from their taunts. Her blood pressure shot up as soon as she got back. She kept saying it was her fault, that she let the wolf in the house." I quickly reassured my father. "Tell Mom that Daniel is no good, and Sarah is just one of many. I can get rid of her whenever I want. I'm just too lazy to deal with her right now. I have a plan, don't worry. My parents have always relied on me." Hearing this, my father nodded. "Your mom and I will look out for each other. But you have to be careful. Learn to let go. You have to give some to get some. And if worst comes to worst, you still have us and your brother. I nodded. I know. I pushed open my mother's bedroom door. The old woman was curled up asleep on the bed, a faded, old-fashioned blanket covering her. She had been frugal her whole life, never willing to replace anything. The splendor of the villa must have been a shock to her. Now her hair was white, her brow furrowed as if troubled by something. That day she was dragged to see the villa was probably a nightmare she would never be able to shake. Suddenly, my heart felt empty, my mind a vast, gaping blank. It was in that moment that I made up my mind. I would destroy the company, leave the scumbag couple with nothing, let them end up with an empty basket after all their scheming. Even if it meant sacrificing my own share, I was willing to burn it all to the ground. And so that led to the scene I described earlier of me bringing the company to ruin. Years ago, I traveled extensively and spent some time in Africa. I saw good opportunities there, so I set up a company in my brother's name. Sometimes, to appease me, Daniel would transfer money to my brother as a voluntary gift. Other times, my brother would sell off company shares and cash out from Daniel. So the current situation is that my brother and I are partners in a business in Africa, mainly dealing in minerals, and it has absolutely no connection to Daniel. Michael's abilities are limited, so he often needs my remote guidance. One day, we were deep in conversation online when the hospital called. Daniel was awake. I was a bit surprised. It took me a moment to realize that, as his wife in name, I was indeed the first person they should notify. As I was walking towards Daniel's room, I ran into a group of doctors leading Sarah towards the doctor's office. I had no intention of greeting them, but the lead doctor recognized me. He called out hesitantly, You Daniel's family?" I pointed at Sarah. "This is the mother of Daniel's children. She's his family." Sarah didn't deny it. She looked at me with smug satisfaction. "I told Daniel all about what you did. He's not going to let you get away with it." I couldn't help it. I laughed out loud. The doctor frowned, looking at me with confusion, but ultimately said nothing and led Sarah away. I always wear flat shoes, so my footsteps were quiet as I approached Daniel's hospital room. Daniel was sitting on the edge of the bed, his feet on the floor, his head hanging low, his expression hidden. His hair was a mess. He raised his empty hands in front of his face, staring at them intently, as if trying to make a flower bloom. After a long moment, he seemed to sense something and looked up. His gaze was vacant yet stubborn, and for a moment our eyes met. Then recognition dawned, followed by an expression of utter disbelief. He looked at me as if I were a monster. With a guttural cry, he lunged at me like a wild animal, but he missed and tumbled awkwardly back onto the bed. He still had an IV in his hand. In the commotion, the needle came out and blood instantly stained the sheets, a shocking splash of red. Amid the chaos, I smiled calmly. "So, good. Saves me the trouble of explaining. It's just as you heard, the company is gone. You're broke. Life is full of ups and downs, isn't it exciting? But look on the bright side, there's nothing to worry about when you have nothing to lose." This only agitated him more. He started punching the mattress with all his might. I couldn't be bothered to watch anymore. I turned to leave. "Let's get the divorce papers sorted out sometime." He looked up sharply and asked me, "What was the point?" "That's a strange question. What was the point? I went to all this trouble to divorce you and make you poor at the same time. Isn't it obvious?" I felt his question was redundant. "But you're left with nothing too, aren't you?" he asked. "I did it for the fun of it," I said with a playful grin. "I love truth more than money. I only lost money, but I achieved a moral victory," I said mockingly, my eyes full of malice amidst my taunts. "Besides, what gives you the right to step on me to climb up, only to trample me later? Why should I let you succeed? Let me tell you, you wasted my youth, destroyed my dreams, and deceived my life. You've done too many wicked things. This is your karma." I spat out the words through gritted teeth. After I finished, I didn't look at him again and turned to leave. As for his condition, let fate decide. I had no interest in finding out. Come back. I'm telling you, I won't divorce you. I'll drag this out until you die. His vicious curses followed me from behind. I hated it when he played the victim. So I turned back. I stood at a distance, not too close, not too far. You idiot. I have so much evidence of your cheating, more than enough to prove our marriage has long been broken. As soon as I file, the divorce will be granted quickly. I twisted the knife further. And another thing, while I'm in a good mood, you'd better divorce me without any fuss. Otherwise, my lawyers are currently gathering evidence of your bigamy. On the property registration for that villa you share with Sarah, you're listed as husband and wife. Once I have more evidence, I'll make you wish you'd never crossed me. After I spoke, I glared at him fiercely, as if trying to burn a hole through him with my eyes. He glared back at me with equal venom. After 2 standoffs, he was the one who finally broke. His eyes darted away, unable to meet my gaze. The day we signed the divorce agreement, Daniel was much calmer. We still had about $8 million in assets. According to a standard divorce settlement, I would get $4.5 million and he would get $3.5 million. He was the at-fault party, so he got less. I made that very clear to him. $3.5 million isn't a small amount. It's more than you would have earned in a lifetime at your state-run job. You see, no matter how much you failed me, I'm still not treating you unfairly. You left your cushy job to join me. Even though you did so many things wrong, I'm just putting you back where you started. As for what you do with your life now, that's none of my business. He was in his late 30s. Retirement at 60 was just over 20 years away. When he left the state-owned enterprise, he was just a junior manager with limited connections, and promotions were slow. So $3.5 million was more than enough to buy out the rest of his career. My original plan was to burn through all our assets, leaving nothing. But the business was so large, I couldn't be that precise in such a short time. If I overdid it and ended up in debt, that would be disastrous. And upon further reflection, I realized it was better to have some cash on hand. So this was the result. Finally, I summarized. I have principles. I see things through from beginning to end. From the day we got together until now, I have never done you wrong. But look at yourself. Can you name one single thing you've done that was right by me? I did leave him some money, but if I hadn't, I would have ended up with nothing myself, which would have been detrimental to my future plans. After signing the divorce papers, he kept his head turned towards the window, his eyes vacant, his thoughts a mystery. Hearing my words, he couldn't help but turn to look at me. I never wanted to divorce you. You can ask Sarah, when did I ever say I would divorce you to marry her? Never. Not once. I laughed. What? Not divorcing me is some kind of favor? Not divorcing me makes you a good man. Do I not deserve a good marriage? He was instantly speechless. Only after the divorce was official could I focus on my own business. I contacted some of my old clients and offered to take on their waterproofing projects. At first, they were hesitant and non-committal. But I had the new formula I had developed earlier, so I was confident. I made them an offer they couldn't refuse. I increased the quality assurance deposit from 10% to 25%, with a 5-year guarantee against leaks and a guarantee for repairs for the next 5 years. Otherwise, they could keep the deposit. The day I signed the contract, I left the client's office. Seeing it was still early, I decided to visit a new potential client in the building next door. I got out of the elevator and had only taken a few steps when I saw Daniel arguing with the receptionist. The secretary said with irritation, "I've told you it's useless, no matter how many times you come. Without an appointment with Mr. Soon, I'm not letting you in." Then the secretary shot Daniel a look as sharp as a knife. It was a look full of contempt and disdain. Daniel, who had been about to argue further, suddenly deflated. He visibly wilted like a punctured balloon. Compared to 6 months ago, his circumstances were worlds apart. He was startled when he saw me. Afraid I would see his pathetic state, he quickly turned and fled. The secretary let out a sigh of relief, glanced at me, and said casually, "That guy is so thick-skinned, he just won't listen. Please come with me. The meeting room is ready for you." Mr. Sun himself received me. "I hear you have some excellent waterproofing materials. I happen to have a big project, but first you'll need to do a few small trial projects for me. Do you agree? Agree? Of course I agreed. I left the new client's office feeling triumphant. I got an important call on my phone. In no hurry to leave, I found a quiet corner in the building to take it. I listened as the person on the other end spoke. Suddenly, I glanced over and saw Daniel squatting nearby, sobbing. It was a low, whimpering sound, his chest heaving. It looked even more sorrowful than loud wailing. The person on the phone, seeing I hadn't responded for a while, thought the signal was bad and raised their voice. Hello, hello? The loud voice startled the weeping Daniel. He looked up and saw me and was instantly flustered. He couldn't pretend anymore. He hastily wiped his tears and tried to make a run for it, but he realized the only escape route was blocked by me. He walked towards me, flustered. As he passed by, he paused for a moment, as if wanting to say something, but in the end, he said nothing and quickly left. Watching his retreating back, I thought he probably wanted to say that he never expected this. In the past, landing clients was tough, but he'd never been treated with such contempt. At most, it took some cleverness, some drinking, some smooth talking. This time, he had truly experienced it. The lower you are, the more vicious people are. He was deeply hurt. My consumer goods business was also doing well. After 5 years, I finally qualified for the distribution rights for the herbal tea from the Yunnan Pharmaceutical Company. By now, my sales channels were well established. This experience and these connections were assets that a divorce couldn't take away. There's a saying, it's best to set your goals early. I had been planning my divorce for years, and I wasn't going to endure all that humiliation for nothing. After the first batch of products sold well, I took my employees out for a team-building dinner at a hotel. I only knew of a few suitable restaurants, so I picked one nearby. And there, I ran into Daniel. He was in the private room right next to mine. In gatherings with many men, smoking is inevitable, so the doors to the private rooms are usually left open. I could clearly hear Daniel trying to attract investors. To do so, he was drinking heavily. He flattered them endlessly, using every sweet word in the book. A couple of companies actually seemed interested in him. That's how this industry works. Deals are often made at the dinner table. Plus, Daniel's past abilities were well known, which was his ticket to this table in the first place. I thought for a moment. The chances of those interested companies actually investing in him weren't high, but what if? What if he really managed to secure an investment? So when I got home, I called Mr. Chen, the mentor who had brought me into the industry. I had always respected him and gave him large red envelopes during holidays. But Daniel had once offended him badly, and his apology had been insincere. I told Mr. Chen that Daniel was busy looking for investors and asked him to see what could be done. The implication was, please do what you can to stop him. Sure enough, not long after, I heard rumors in our circle that Daniel was being blacklisted. With that, I could breathe a little easier. But another part of me was still uneasy. I was worried that Daniel might actually pull something off, and if he did, he wouldn't let me go. He was the type to only remember the bad things people did, never the good. I knew this from experience, so I took the initiative. I set a trap for him. Whether he fell for it was up to him. I found a few acquaintances, and in casual conversation, I mentioned that I was going to Africa to check on my company's business there. I emphasized that the situation in Africa was good right now, and my main purpose wasn't just to check the books, but to scout for new business opportunities. These acquaintances also knew Daniel, so after a few retellings, the news reached him. He knew I was busy with my companies in China, that my new businesses were booming. Why would I drop everything to go to Africa? Was there a huge opportunity? It was bound to make him think. So he called me. I need to audit the books. Who knows if you used marital assets to fund the African company? I'm coming over to investigate personally. I've already hired lawyers and accountants, and they'll be on video call with me the whole time. I readily agreed. Sure, go ahead. I'll cooperate. But I'm not paying for your food or lodging. Daniel and I were on the same flight to Africa. Sarah must have been afraid that Daniel and I would rekindle our old flame, spending all that time together, so she came along too. On the plane, my seat was across the aisle from the couple, quite close. Before takeoff, the cabin was chaotic with people bustling about. The local African passengers had an incredible amount of luggage, pushing and shoving, chattering loudly. Finally, most people were seated, but we still had a while before takeoff. To Sarah's left sat a young, skinny black man. To her right was Daniel. I was on the aisle with a large black woman on my other side. The woman was so large that despite the armrest, her flesh spilled over and pressed against me, making me extremely uncomfortable. Sarah could see me just by turning her head. She smiled smugly. "Well, sis, I guess you shot yourself in the foot. If this were before, we'd all be flying first class." I smiled back. Even before, I wouldn't have wasted money on first class. A long-haul first-class ticket costs over $60,000 more. I would never fly first class no matter when. That's the mindset of someone who built a business from scratch. So this situation is definitely harder on you than it is on me. Her face paled, and she turned away in a huff. It wasn't long before trouble started on her side. The skinny man sitting next to her started taking off his clothes. After taking off one shirt, he started on his pants. Sarah, who had been trying to endure it, suddenly shot up with a piercing scream. "Ah!" The shriek was so shrill that a flight attendant quickly rushed over, but it was useless. They were having a complete communication breakdown. The flight attendant didn't speak Chinese, and Sarah didn't speak English. Daniel's English was so rusty, he couldn't just reboot it on the spot. Plus, Sarah was standing there, gesturing wildly and turning in circles, her butt practically in his face. He had to keep leaning away to avoid her. The flight attendant grew increasingly impatient, looking at them as if they were idiots. The staff on this kind of airline isn't always the most professional. I saw other foreigners watching the spectacle, so I decided to put aside personal grievances for a moment and help them out. I spoke a few sentences in fluent English to the young black man next to Sarah, confirming my suspicion. Then I turned to Sarah and said, "He's a mule. He buys clothes here in bulk to sell back in Africa. He usually brings them as checked and carry-on luggage, but anything over the weight limit he wears. He wasn't being rude to you just now. He was just trying to take off the merchandise. These aren't his clothes, they're goods he's taking back to sell." Sarah stared dumbfounded, forgetting to reply. She just looked at Daniel instinctively. Daniel frowned. He kept taking off layers, but he never exposed himself. "I was about to tell you not to overreact, but you just exploded." Sarah was not happy. "Your English is terrible. You didn't say a single word just now." Daniel was suddenly at a loss for words. If Daniel's English had a chance of being revived, Sarah's was practically non-existent. How could she have the nerve to blame Daniel? I was reminded of Daniel's own talent for shifting blame. It really was a case of the biter bit. I sat back down. After the first meal, I told the flight attendant not to bring me any more food as I was going to sleep. The seat was too small, and being squeezed by the large woman next to me was uncomfortable. I took out the sleeping pill I had prepared, swallowed one, and fell into a deep sleep. Sometimes I could feel myself slumping onto the woman next to me. Other times I could vaguely hear Sarah's side being noisy about something. But mostly, I slept soundly, unaware of where I was, feeling no discomfort. When the plane landed and we were all lining up to get off, Daniel was behind me. He said to me with a stiff expression, "Do you have any more of those sleeping pills? Can you give me one for the return trip?" I smiled coldly, hoping that on the return trip he'd still be in any condition to sleep. I had told Daniel he could come to Africa to audit my accounts, but I also said I wouldn't be responsible for his food and lodging. He probably didn't realize the importance of that last part at the time and didn't make any detailed arrangements. After arriving, the reality of the local situation quickly taught him a lesson. He had managed to contact someone from the Chamber of Commerce to host him, but since they weren't familiar with each other, it must have been very inconvenient. The next time I saw them was at my hotel. My brother and I had started a business here. The mining business is a 3 years no deal, one deal feeds you for 3 kind of thing. The last 2 years have been slow for mining, so my brother and I opened a hotel. The so-called hotel was just a piece of land we bought by a lake where we built a few dozen houses. Every 10 houses formed a courtyard, and several courtyards were connected. In the middle, we either put in a pool or a garden. It had that unique local layout. It wasn't hard to set up. What was difficult and what I had was a foundation here. I could solve the electricity problem and provide power 24/7. I was sitting at the bar next to the front desk, sipping a drink. A few local black men were already drinking in the middle of the day, and the whole lobby had a relaxed, pleasant atmosphere. That's when Sarah and Daniel walked in. Sarah didn't see me. She walked in and exclaimed, "What a beautiful place. It's like a paradise." "Daniel, I want to stay here." Daniel sighed and patted her hand. "Let me ask the price." He walked over to the bar and asked cautiously in broken English, "Excuse me, how much is a room for one night?" The front desk clerk glanced at me as if to say, "Boss, your folks are here." I looked down and ignored him. Daniel then noticed I was there and seemed to relax. It was as if my presence confirmed that the place was indeed good and he could rest easy. The front desk told him $150 a night. His brow twitched. The price was clearly a bit steep for him. We had been here for 2 days and everyone was still adjusting to the time difference. But 2 days was enough for him to get a sense of the local prices. The poor were truly poor, but the rich lived in another world where things were expensive. He turned to Sarah. "Let's just stay at Old Chien's place. It's too expensive here, and I'm not just staying for 2 days." Sarah's face immediately fell. "Daniel, I came here with you, and I've already put up with a lot without complaining. I was prepared to rough it with you. Eleanor could do it, so I can too." "But look at Eleanor. She's staying here too, isn't she? At Old Chien's place, one day there's no water, the next there's no power, and the third day there's no water or power. I can't take it anymore. I'm not asking for much. Just a few days here to catch my breath, then we can go back to Old Chien's." Daniel's brow furrowed, his expression displeased. "Once we leave Old Chien's place, how can we go back? Are you going to say, your place is too shabby, I just needed a break, and now I have to come back? Do you think Old Chien deserves to be bothered by us like that? Why don't you understand these basic social graces?" Sarah's eyes welled up with tears at his words. "All you do is find fault with me," she said, hurt. "You don't understand my difficulties at all." Daniel sighed again, a deep, heavy sigh this time. His face was filled with sorrow. "I told you not to come, but you insisted. You're just making a scene." Sarah started to cry and wail. "You're looking down on me. You're already getting impatient. What did I do? Just because I wanted to spend a little money, I'm a burden? Are you serious?" Daniel opened his mouth to say something, but in the end, nothing came out. I guess he wanted to say, "Yes, I am serious. The few million I have won't last forever." But he just shook his head and sighed. I noticed he sighed a lot now. What did he have to sigh about? He still had a few million. That was infinitely better than when we started with nothing. He was just bitter about falling from such a great height. I wanted him to be miserable. That meant my goal was achieved. Let him suffer. Let him be in pain. Let him feel resentful. Let his mind be a battlefield of conflicting emotions, a constant state of self-torment. Let him be forever dissatisfied. These were all things I had endured. I wanted him to go through every single one of them. He ultimately decided to stay, paying for 10 days up front. He was surprised to find he could pay with WeChat. After he pressed the transfer button, my phone pinged. "You have received a WeChat payment of 10,000 wien." He looked up at me sharply, his face a mask of disbelief. Sarah noticed something was wrong and looked over too. I nodded. "This hotel is mine. You didn't pay the wrong person." Sarah jumped up. "Eleanor, you hid marital assets. I should get a share of this hotel." Before I could say anything, Daniel spoke, his voice laced with bitterness. "Eleanor wouldn't do something like that. If I'm not mistaken, she probably used the money I gave her mother-in-law to build this hotel. No wonder she always made me specify that it was a voluntary gift." "Eleanor, were you planning to leave me from that far back? Were you thinking about splitting up? About how to bankrupt me and leave me with nothing from all the way back then?" "Is that it?" I scoffed. "Not earlier than when you first betrayed me." "Actually, I've been wanting to ask you, when was the first time you cheated on me? And when was the first time you slept with Sarah? Did you think of me then? What was going through your mind? What a joke." If I didn't bring up these things, it was as if the filth never happened, and he could righteously question me. How dare they? Daniel's expression shifted dramatically, a mix of pain, regret, and resentment. Finally, he covered his face with his hands to hide his emotions. On the second night of their stay, I was relaxing by the pool. The pace of life here is slow, perfect for living. There's none of the hustle and bustle of a big city. The world is quiet, with only the gentle sound of water flowing in the pool. It's very pleasant. When Daniel approached me, I thought it was a waiter bringing me fruit. I was playing on my phone and said casually, "Just put it there." Seeing that I didn't shoo him away, Daniel sat down in the chair next to me. I looked up and met a pair of deep eyes. "I was just thinking, how many backup plans did you set up for yourself before you destroyed the company?" What a buzzkill. This man was born to ruin a good mood. I chuckled softly. No need to be jealous. They're just small businesses. After all these years of reform and opening up, the golden age of the construction industry is over. You should probably settle down and live a quiet life too. But he wouldn't listen. "I'll work hard. What you can do, I can do too. It's just starting over, right?" I didn't argue with him because there was no point. He persisted. "You look down on me." I smiled. "It doesn't matter if I look down on you or not. As long as the one at home looks up to you, that's all that matters. We're on different paths now." He suddenly looked dejected. He didn't say he regretted it. Didn't say he was sorry. He just lowered his head and was silent for a long time. I was about to get up and leave, but he, afraid I would go, quickly spoke up. "Even heroes seem ordinary once you get to know them. I didn't realize it before, but now from this position, I see how much smarter you are than everyone else. Now that I've calmed down, I realize you have the courage to tear everything down and start over. If our positions were reversed, I know I couldn't do it. You didn't want to make it easy for us, did you? Me, the mistress, the illegitimate children? You felt like we were all benefiting from your hard work." I raised an eyebrow. "Weren't you?" He pursed his lips, thought for a moment, and nodded, finally admitting, "Yes. I rode your coattails, and the women on the outside unscrupulously profited from you." I finally stopped mocking him and nodded in acknowledgement. "It's rare for you to admit it. I was thinking, with your personality, you'd probably resent me for the rest of your life." He looked up sharply as if I had hit a nerve. Then he changed the subject, continuing our conversation. He probably understood that this was likely the only chance we would ever have to talk like this again. "Some people are iridescent. When you meet them, you know nothing will ever compare. But I didn't cherish you," he said with a bitter smile. "I always thought you and other women each had your strengths. You were generous and capable, a perfect wife and homemaker. The women on the outside were sometimes beautiful and gentle, sometimes hot and passionate. And then there are those like Sarah who are eager to please, suitable as a kept woman." His smile grew even more bitter. "From where I stand now, I finally understand that you are worlds apart. You have the power to change the world, while they are just parasitic vines, dependent on men to survive. As for Sarah, I suddenly realized one day that if you threw her into a crowd, I wouldn't even be able to find her. She's so ordinary. To be honest, I haven't even married her. I was considering it for the sake of the 2 kids, but I feel like I'd be settling for so much less. I mean, I'm a graduate from a top university, and her, a vocational school student. I could close my eyes and pick a random person from a crowd and they'd be better than her. She's just so low class. What did I ever see in her?" I burst out laughing. "You telling me all this? If your wife hears it, there'll be another scene. What's the point? I'm tired. I'm going to bed." He smiled and waved his hand, asking me to sit down and continue talking. The night was intoxicating. It was a rare sight to see him willing to put aside our grudges and discuss heroes over wine. So I continued to listen to his flattery. He spoke more and more fluently, without a hint of awkwardness. "I was blinded by all the pretty flowers. To even compare you to them. Wasn't that an insult to you in itself? I was so wrong. Don't worry, I'm not here to ask for your forgiveness or for you to take me back. I understand that you went to such great lengths to bring me down because you had no intention of reconciling. From now on, we can only be strangers." He suddenly laughed, a laugh mixed with tears. I'm laughing at myself. I used to think I was a successful man, and having many women was a sign of a man's success. Others had it, so I had to have it too. But I didn't realize that messy relationships are the worst thing for a man's luck. Your place in my heart will always be irreplaceable. I thought you understood that, and I understood it too. So I figured you wouldn't mind the wildflowers on the side. I was being arrogant. I thought being surrounded by beautiful women was the greatest pleasure in life. I had succeeded, so I had to experience it. My mistake was wanting to have my cake and eat it too. I wanted both pleasure and a good wife. How can a person be so greedy? I was resting on your laurels, but I didn't respect you, the hero. I was too full of myself. I felt a sense of alarm. His self-reflection was not a good sign. The more clear-headed he became, the closer he was to success. Don't be fooled by his nice words. He was a threat to me. I hoped my plans hadn't been in vain. I had no desire to listen to him anymore. I'm going to bed. If your wife wakes up and hears you saying these things, she'll definitely throw a fit. Let the past be the past. Don't be in a hurry, just a few more words, he insisted, not letting me go. He had to have his say. He had been more honest in the last few minutes than in the past few years combined. She won't wake up. Look at her low background, no ability. She talks a big game about roughing it with me, but it's all for show. She can't handle any hardship at all. I had already contacted the Chamber of Commerce. Even though we were new here, at least someone was hosting us. The living conditions were a bit rough, but I told her that before we came. But it's not that she's in a bad mood and trying to make trouble for me. She genuinely can't handle it. She can't sleep if she doesn't wash her hair, so she lies awake all night. During the day, she's so tired, just waiting for the water and power to come back on so she can wash her hair. The Chan family is trying to save water when it's available. What can I say? Now that she's in a nice environment, she's sleeping like a log, like she hasn't slept in 800 years. He lowered his gaze, and just as my patience was about to run out, he spoke again. Did our relationship get this bad because of her? If I hadn't had children with her, would you have just divorced me and been done with it? He looked at me with an earnest gaze, desperate for an answer. I gave it to him straight. Yes. If it had been anyone else, it would have just been a divorce. No scorched earth. He smiled bitterly. I knew it. Then his laughter grew more and more frantic until he was doubled over. Watching him lose control like that, I felt a sense of satisfaction. He later composed himself and said wistfully, I pushed you too far. I forced you to play your deadliest hand. A hero like you, how could you endure such humiliation? I was resting on your laurels, but I didn't respect you, the hero who earned them. I just thought success came so easily that you were nothing special. I misjudged. I was arrogant. As I turned to leave, he said from behind me, It's a shame life doesn't have a reset button. There's no turning back for me. A shame. Everyone has the right to say what a shame except him. If it weren't for him, my career wouldn't have had to start over from scratch. If anyone deserved a second chance, a new beginning, it was me, not him. And he had the nerve to say it was a shame. I hadn't even said that word yet. On the fourth day after landing, Daniel came to my company to audit the books. Just as he had said, even if I was going to destroy the company, I would do it within the legal framework of divorce and asset division. I wouldn't do anything shady. He knew perfectly well that the audit would yield nothing, yet he still came over putting on a show. He would frequently video call his lawyers and accountants, showing them my ledgers. I knew he was just trying to pry into my business secrets. The construction industry back home was becoming increasingly competitive. It was hard enough to maintain one's position, let alone for someone like him who was starting from scratch. It was clear he wanted to make a name for himself here in Africa. Nowadays, getting rich requires 3 things, one of which is to take the path others dare not tread. As he looked through my books, he quickly figured out my business model, and with the video call going, my client information was being leaked. I knew his little game and I had my own malicious intentions. This place is full of scammers, and for a newcomer Chinese person, they're like a juicy piece of meat, enough to make countless scammers vie for a piece. I brought him here precisely to set a trap for him. He was cautious, after all. On this trip, he did nothing and returned to China. I followed shortly after. My brother later told me that Daniel had come back once by himself, looking around, thinking of renting a place to get into the mining business. But for some reason, he ended up doing nothing and went back again. I was very disappointed. I felt that Daniel was indeed very capable. He clearly desired success, yet he could see reality and resist temptation. He could almost fight against human nature itself. I felt a strong sense of defeat. Just then, I got news from my mom. She heard from relatives that Sarah had taken the money Daniel was going to use for business and invested it in the stock market, losing more than half of it. So that's what happened. Daniel didn't fail in Africa because Sarah had lost his money. Was this a blessing in disguise? He only lost a part of his money in the stock market. If he had taken it to Africa, he might have lost everything. But Daniel didn't see it that way. He felt that Sarah had ruined him and demanded that she pay him back every day. Later, he used the remaining money to rent a storefront in the hardware and electronics market, trying to do what I did and start a hardware business. One time, I went to the market to pick up some goods. The place where I was supposed to meet my client was very close to Daniel's shop. While I was waiting, I heard Daniel and Sarah arguing fiercely. Daniel was yelling angrily at Sarah, "We haven't made a sale in days. What are you even doing here?" Sarah wailed back defensively, "Business is tough right now. Times have changed. You can't keep comparing me to Eleanor." Daniel suddenly fell silent, then a voice dripping with sarcasm emerged. "You want to compare yourself to Eleanor? How dare you? She's a certified powerhouse. You couldn't dream of having her skills. Don't you ever mention her name to me. You're not in her league. If you want to compare yourself to Mrs. Lee next door. Even her marketing skills are way better than yours. You know what? Just go home and take care of the kids. I'll poach Mrs. Lee to watch the store for me." Sarah kept sniffling, her tears flowing freely. She choked out, "My whole life, my relatives have looked down on me. Now you're doing it too. Let me tell you, Daniel, if it weren't for the kids, I wouldn't even bother with you. You want Mrs. Lee to come over? Can you even afford to pay her?" Daniel was fuming, shouting in frustration. "If I hire Mrs. Lee or even a regular employee, my store might have a chance. If I keep you here, I'm doomed. You're mediocre and you know it. Why can't you just admit it? It's not that people look down on you, it's that you're genuinely not good enough." Face reality. Sarah suddenly let out a cold laugh. "My whole life, the only thing I ever beat Eleanor at was stealing you from her. And I have you to thank for being so cooperative. Otherwise, I would have never won against her, not once in my life." Daniel suddenly stopped talking. Then I heard the sound of a man crying, a low sobbing coming from inside the store. "I'm sorry, Eleanor. It was my filth that sullied your dream. You did the right thing by destroying the company. I deserved it. This is what I get." For the first time ever, I heard Daniel apologize to me. He had said sorry before, but those were just empty words to placate me, a temporary measure before he quickly went back to his mistress. This was the first time I had heard an apology that sounded truly heartfelt. He was the type who would rather lose than admit defeat. Even if he realized he was wrong, he would never apologize to me, not to mention his habit of shifting blame. Even though I wasn't there with them, and they didn't know I was listening in this situation, I heard his somewhat sincere repentance. What a rare thing. Later, I ran into Daniel multiple times at various construction sites. Just as Vice President Chen had told me years ago, the hardware store business would only get harder. So whenever I saw Daniel, he was either being left to wait endlessly on the sidelines or being dragged and pushed out the door. The expression on Daniel's face changed from initial embarrassment to numbness. He increasingly looked like a beggar, exuding an aura of desperation. One more time, as I was passing his hardware store, I heard a huge fight inside. This time, the argument was different. Daniel and Sarah had lost all sense of civility and were just slinging vulgarities at each other. A stream of profanity-laced insults filled the air, and I quickly left the scene. On my way back, I had to pass by again. This time, I saw Daniel's son and daughter. The two children were cute, but they were filthy, and their clothes were a size too small, their pant legs riding up their ankles. I suddenly smiled. I couldn't imagine them, in their previous life, attending private preschool and expensive extracurricular classes. Sarah's mother led the two children and pushed open the door, so preoccupied with finding someone that she didn't even notice me nearby. I once again overheard their family drama. Sarah's mother, my aunt, shouted loudly, "Daniel, I don't care how you run your business, but you have to pay for the little one's preschool and the older one's tutoring." Daniel snorted, "I have no money. You can have my life, but not my money." Sarah's mom lost it. "Daniel, those are your children too. You have a responsibility. Now you're living in my house, eating my food, and I'm using my retirement pension to help raise your kids. Is this how you treat me? For the past 2 years, you've been messing around, completely ignoring the children. They're sick, one day at the hospital, the next. Have you ever cared? It's been me and my husband running around. I've worried myself sick these past 2 years. My hair has turned white overnight. Haven't you seen? Do you have a conscience?" The battle-hardened Daniel snorted again. "When your daughter was seducing me, you didn't have this attitude. Every time I came to your house, you practically worshipped me. Now you're kicking me when I'm down. Let me tell you, that doesn't work on me." Sarah's mom sat down on the floor with a thud and started wailing, kicking her legs. "You heartless monster! How did our family end up with a piece of work like you?" Daniel was unmoved. He continued nonchalantly, "I had a chance to make a comeback. If it weren't for your daughter losing money in the stock market, I might have succeeded. Now you're asking me for money? I don't have any. Go ask your daughter." Sarah's mom saw that crying wasn't working. Her wails subsided, and she pulled herself together. "My daughter is like this. She was born without any talent. You were willing to be with her back then, and now you're complaining." Daniel scoffed. "She has no talent? Her talent is huge. I never wanted anything to do with her in the first place. She's the one who relentlessly seduced me. You know what? Since the family is short on money, why don't you let her go out and sell herself? That's what she's good at." Sarah's mom tried to say something, but Daniel cut her off. "She'll make a lot of money selling herself. When she does, tell her to pay back the money she cost me. I still want to invest in Africa." I was shocked. I had expected them to turn on each other, but I never thought it would be this brutal. Sarah's mom suddenly went silent. Then Daniel's voice came through. "Hey, old lady, don't just faint on me now. My kids still need you to raise them. Does your chest hurt or your head?" "Never mind. I'll just call an ambulance for you." There was no more show to watch, so I left. Later, I heard that Sarah's mom had a stroke and was hospitalized. Fortunately, she was treated in time and was fine when she was discharged. But the responsibility of taking care of her grandchildren still fell on her. She was constantly running around in all kinds of weather. It seems she would have been better off if she had been sicker. During the busiest time at the end of the year, I received a long text message from Daniel. Because it was so long, my phone didn't flag it as spam. He still didn't apologize or say he regretted anything, but he told me about his future plans, and every word was filled with remorse. How ridiculous. Many people only regret their crimes after they're caught and punished. When they're getting away with it, you don't see any remorse. Daniel was the same. If I hadn't stepped in to punish him, he'd probably still be scheming how to keep me miserable and too afraid to ask for a divorce. In the text, Daniel said he was going to the South to start over in a new city. The social circles here were familiar, but everyone had watched him fall from the peak and was now just watching him for entertainment, full of malice. He said he had watched a video about a fugitive who, because he couldn't use his ID, had worked illegally on construction sites for over a decade and had still managed to make a fortune. He was preparing to endure the same hardship to build a new career. He said he would return in glory, that he had faith in himself. He then added presumptuously, "If I succeed, if I can stand shoulder to shoulder with you, would you be willing to give me another chance?" After reading that sentence, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. This man was delusional. He thought that because I had punished him, we were even, and all our past grievances could just be forgotten. Did he think I had no regrets about tearing down the empire I had built with my own hands just to drag him down with me out of spite? I wanted to tear him limb from limb. As adults, we just don't show it on the surface. Where did he get the confidence that I would just forgive and forget? Just because we didn't end up fighting that night by the pool, he thought I'd give him another chance? I was just setting a trap for him, wanting him to walk right into it. My mom told me that right after Daniel left, Sarah also left home. Whether they went to the same place, no one knew. A long time later, Daniel sent me a message. He didn't say where he was. It was just one sentence. A true powerhouse dares to start a business, dares to be a pioneer, and has the courage to tear everything down and start over. I truly admire you, Eleanor. I'm also starting from scratch now. It's hard, really hard. When I said I understood you before, it was just on the surface. Now that I'm actually doing it, I know what it feels like to be in hell. I will persevere, temper my will, establish my goals, and reshape myself into a different person. I'll accept the compliments. I know I deserve them. A true leading lady doesn't just decide to get serious about her career after getting her heart broken. She always knows what she wants, what price she has to pay, and she dedicates herself to hard work from start to finish, her original intentions unwavering. I don't care for his regrets. As for him, he can go wherever he wants, as long as he stays out of my sight. On my birthday, I went to the beach in the neighboring city and set off a magnificent fireworks show for myself. Beautiful, enormous fireworks shot into the sky one after another. I jumped up and down with joy like a fool. Honestly, people are happiest when they're being a little foolish. There were times when I was incredibly depressed, just barely enduring the immense pain in my heart. Watching Daniel and his little lover squander my hard-earned money, I wanted to die. Daniel had once put on a fireworks show for his favorite mistress on a beach in a southern resort town. He had made the same promise to me when we were poor, but when he could finally fulfill it, the recipient wasn't me. I had been tormented by all sorts of negative emotions, far from the calm exterior I presented. Now I had completely let it go. I threw myself the long-awaited fireworks show. It was a bit lonely by myself, but who isn't lonely? As the fireworks show entered its second half, the sounds weren't as loud. My neck was getting sore from looking up all the time. I shook my head and noticed a man standing not far away. Who would come to this deserted beach in the middle of a winter? I sized him up. He was clearly a rich man. At least he wasn't a homeless person. I was a little worried about my safety being alone. But the man walked over and asked with a smile, "Setting off fireworks by yourself?" I nodded, thinking to myself, so what if I'm alone? He had a powerful presence, but his expression was kind. He made small talk with me. I was driving by and I love fireworks, so I stopped to watch. Hope you don't mind me crashing your show. I shook my head. He extended his hand. David Lee. Wow. If I remembered correctly, David Lee was a construction tycoon in the neighboring city. I quickly shook his hand. I pulled out my business card to introduce myself, but he simply added me on WeChat. I had several business ideas I wanted to expand to the neighboring city. And now I had a connection to the top guy. The future looked promising. As he was leaving, David asked, "Aren't you that Eleanor from the next city over?" Oh, great. My infamous reputation had spread far and wide. I was a villain in the stories of many men, I knew that. But being recognized by a tycoon at this moment was still a bit awkward. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to climb this social ladder now. I looked at David nervously. He opened his car door, about to get in, then paused. He turned to me and gave me a thumbs up. "You're a legend. I look forward to getting to know you. If you ever need anything, come find me." My heart truly felt like a firework had just exploded inside. 3 years passed in a flash. My career was back at its peak. Although not as grand as during the height of my time with Daniel, it was still formidable. After all, times were different. The period back then was truly the most prosperous era for the entire construction industry. So to have achieved what I have now is no small feat. News came from my mom again. Sarah and Daniel had been gone for 3 years without a word. Sarah's mother was struggling to raise the 2 children. Sarah's father was obsessed with fishing and utterly useless, only able to offer a helping hand now and then. And so Sarah's mother, my aunt, the same woman who had once flaunted her triumph in front of my mother, had another stroke. This time it was severe. She was said to be paralyzed and bedridden, with one side of her face drooping. The children needed someone to take care of them. Sarah finally returned, but then something strange happened. On the very night she came back, Daniel's parents, who had been playing dead and retiring in Hainan with a supposed severe asthma condition, also returned. The next day, they took the children away. The relatives were baffled, and the rumors grew wilder and wilder. Later, Daniel sent me a text message warning me, "Sarah went into sex work and caught something incurable. Be careful, she wants revenge on society, and you're her most likely target." She's been trying to contact me for years. I've ignored her, but I know what she's thinking. She's insanely jealous of you and hates you for destroying her dream of being a rich man's wife. I was genuinely scared, so I hired bodyguards to accompany me everywhere. One day in the underground parking garage, as I was looking for my car, a figure suddenly lunged at me, holding what looked like a weapon. After giving birth, I had started working out at the gym to get back in shape and had also learned some self-defense. It paid off. I executed a shoulder throw and pinned the person to the ground. It was indeed Sarah. Pinned beneath me, she was still waving a syringe in one hand, not giving up. The two bodyguards quickly rushed over and subdued her. We called the police together. Sarah would be spending a long time in jail. She really did have a disease. Daniel's parents had come back so suddenly to take the children because they were afraid of them getting infected. I just didn't understand why she had to hate me. But people with her kind of personality always blame others. They're never at fault. I had seen it all before. Actually, Daniel and she were the same kind of person. That's why they got together. No conscience, no morals, no principles. The next time I saw Daniel was when I was taking my child to the doctor. I was in a frantic hurry getting out of the car. The recent wave of infectious diseases, one after another, had left me mentally exhausted. I didn't even notice when Daniel appeared in front of me. I got out of the driver's seat, and as I turned to get my child from the back, I saw him. He looked at least 15 years older, maybe even 50. He once said of me that the hardships I had endured were written all over my face, that I looked old and tired. Now, I was well-maintained, with no trace of those hardships. That same description now fit him perfectly. I didn't know what he had been through all these years to age so rapidly. He held up a diamond ring, large and dazzling. He looked at me with a smug expression, his eyes even holding a hint of youthful clarity. "Eleanor, I've been through every kind of hardship these past few years. I started as a laborer on construction sites, and now I'm a contractor again. I have money now. I've fulfilled my promise to stand shoulder to shoulder with you. So, can you give me another chance?" I sighed internally. First a crazy woman, now a crazy man. What kind of cosmic connection did I have with these people? Before I could say anything, David's luxury car pulled up. He's 5 years older than me, but he looked at least 10 years younger than Daniel. He quickly walked over to my side, gently chiding me. "The baby is sick. Why didn't you call me?" I explained quietly. "Didn't you say you had an important meeting today?" He chided me again. "What's more important than you and the baby?" I explained again, I just got a call from the preschool teacher and rushed over. I even forgot to call the driver. He gave me another reproachful look. "You're a grown woman, always in a panic. What am I going to do with you? From now on, I'm the contact person for the preschool. You can't be trusted." I lowered my head in resignation, not offering any resistance. David had already adjusted our child's clothes, packed up the belongings, slung the backpack over his shoulder, and scooped the child out of the car. I stood beside him, empty-handed. It was as if he had just noticed Daniel. He glanced at him casually and asked me, "Who's this?" I had almost forgotten about him, too. "My ex-husband," I said irritably. Daniel froze, his body stiff. He looked at me in disbelief, stumbling back a few steps, his face a mixture of tears and laughter. "I rushed here. I didn't know. I guess it makes sense. Why would you wait for me?" He let his arm fall limply and the ring fell to the ground with a clink. Then he fled, disappearing in an instant. My husband started nagging again. Haven't you learned your lesson from that Sarah incident? You're letting these lunatics get close to you again. I kicked him in the leg and said through gritted teeth, if you keep nagging like a broken record, you'll be sorry when we get home. And so he obediently shut up. The next time I heard news of Daniel, it was that he was very sick with some organ failing. The rumor mill was churning. The story was that he had worked himself to the bone over the years, completely exhausting his body. I heard the news at a dinner party and just found the messenger to be noisy. The name Daniel no longer stirred any emotion in me. He was truly a stranger. He did, however, video call me once. I answered irritably, not giving him a chance to speak. I shot back, I hear you've made some money. You're not calling me to ask for donations for your medical bills, are you? He choked up, only managing to say, Eleanor, I'm sorry. For all these years, I'm sorry. On his deathbed, still looking for absolution. When he was on top, he certainly didn't leave any room for me, so I said coldly, I don't accept it, Daniel. Not every I'm sorry gets a that's okay. And that was the end. He deserved his fate, which he brought on himself. He was the one who was full of anger and confusion, but I felt a strange sense of peace.